Hi, very good morning to all of you, and a warm welcome to all our viewers who have joined us in this show. Welcome to our YouTube channel, Skepta. I'm your host, Dr. Mani Iyer. Before we start, I request all of you, to kindly subscribe this video, like this video, and press the bell button. Share this video as well to all your friends and relatives and press the bell button for notifications. This will go in a long way in supporting this channel and help us to bring much more programs like this to you. All right, let's begin. Everyone knows fight or flight, but what about the person who goes completely blank? In an argument, and he cannot say a single word, or the person, the moment gets tense, starts apologizing or something that isn't even their fault. Those aren't weakness. They are two more survival responses to our nervous system. Knows Our nervous system knows how to freeze and fawn. Today we are going to understand exactly why our body does this with real everyday examples you will probably recognize and maybe even in yourselves. So, welcome to the show. Today we are joined by renowned psychologist Ms.Medhavi Sati, a rehabilitation and clinical psychologist by profession. Hi, Medhavi, welcome back to our program and welcome back to the show. Yes, Medhavi.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited about this one because I think almost every listener is going to have an, oh, that's what that was moment today.
Yes. For anyone tuning in for the first time, we give you a quick background of Ms. Medhavi. Medhavi ji holds a MPhil in rehabilitation psychology, recognized by RCI, the Rehabilitation Council of India. She has worked across all government clinical settings, including the Composite Regional Center in Lucknow and a couple of government hospitals in Uttarakhand, where she has directly worked with survivors, and she has seen these freeze and fawn responses come up constantly in her work, far more than often people expect. So let's start with the basics, Medhaviji. Everyone heard fight or flight. What are we missing?
Let's start with the basics. So, everyone has heard flight or fight. We first described it over a century ago by a philosopher named Walter Cannon. So the idea was that when you are threatened, your body either prepares to confront the danger or to run away from it. And that's real and it's still accurate. But it's incomplete. There are two more responses that are just as automatic, just as common, and honestly, in a lot of situations, more common than fight and flight.
So let's take them one at a time. What's freeze, map?
Freeze, freeze is like it is what happens when your body, decides that neither fighting or not running is possible or safe. So instead of the mobilization, it does the opposite. It shuts down. You might feel physically stuck, unable to speak, foggy, numb, almost like you're watching the situation from outside your own body. For example, think of a student. Let's call her Ananya. Ananya who has studied thoroughly for her Viva. The examiner asks a question. She absolutely knows the answer too, and her mind goes completely blank. Not because she didn't know it. Her nervous system briefly decided that the pressure of the moment was a threat and shut her down instead of letting her speak.
And what about fawn, ma'am?
So, fawn is like more social. It's when your nervous system decides the safest path is to appease the threat, to please, to agree, or to comply, even at your own expense. The term coined by a therapist named Pete Walker, who added it to Cannon's original model as a fourth response. You know, for example, think of a guy called Karan, okay, who at every family gathering ends up agreeing with an uncle's opinion he actually disagrees with, laughing at jokes and don't land for him, and volunteering to fix whatever tension is in the room, even when it isn't his to fix. He isn't being fake. His system learned a long time ago that keeping everyone calm was the safest role to play.
So, from what you're saying, ma'am, I guess that these are not, what do you call, these are not choices they make. They are kind of, what could you describe them? They are,
Yes, they are not choices, they are automatic responses. That's the single most important thing to understand today. Nobody consciously chooses to freeze or fawn in the moment. Your nervous system picks whichever response has kept you safest before, faster than conscious thought it even happens.
okay. So, is there some real science behind why the body picks one response over the another? Or why does the body
Yes,
do this automatically?
yes. The clearest explanation comes from a framework called polyvagal theory. Not going into the technicality, but just getting it in an overview. So, it was developed by a researcher named Stephen Poggs. The idea is that your nervous system has a hierarchy of safest responses. When you feel safe, you are a you are you are in a ventral vagal state. Ventral vagal state is like socially engaged, calm, able to connect with people, right? So when a threat appears, your system first tries sympathetic activation, fight or flight. But if that doesn't feel viable, you are trapped. You feel outmatched, or the threat is someone you depend on. So the system drops into a more primitive state called the dorsal vagal shutdown, and that's the freeze.
And where does fawn fit, ma'am?
Fawn is more of a blend. It uses your social engagement system, the same one involved in connection and warmth, but strategically under the threat to neutralize danger, through appeasement rather than confrontation or withdrawal. For example, imagine a driver called Rohan, who gets cut off aggressively in traffic, and the other driver gets out of his car shouting. Rohan's system run through the hierarchy almost instantly. A flicker or fight. His jaw clenches. Then a fast recalculation that this man is bigger and angrier than he can handle. And within a second, he is apologizing, even though the accident was his fault. That whole sequence happened in under 2 seconds. entirely outside his, conscious control.
Really, that's a really different way of thinking about people pleasing.
It is completely. Once you see fawn as a survival response rather than a personality trait, it changes the entire conversation. From why are they like that to what kept them safe, you know?
Mhm. So we would like, let's see, freeze. Let's talk about what this freeze actually looks like from day to day.
Freeze, it actually shows up in small ways and big ways. The small version, someone goes blank mid-argument and can't find a single word. It happens when we do conversations, our mind, when we in heated argument or, in a debate, sometimes mid-argument falls like that. We don't have a single word, even though they had a lot to say 5 minutes earlier. But because of, freeze response, it happens. For example, a husband and wife are arguing about finances. The husband suddenly goes quiet, stares at the table, and stops responding entirely. His wife reads this as him not caring or shutting her out deliberately. But what's actually happening? Physiologically, maybe the freeze response. You know, his system got overwhelmed and shut down, not out of indifference, but because the conflict crossed a threshold, a threshold that his body couldn't say stay mobilized throughout. This exact pattern is well documented in relationship research, sometimes which is called stonewalling. And understanding it as freeze rather than as contempt changes how a couple can work through it.
Sure, that connects to something that comes up, constantly. People usually ask survivors, why didn't you just fight back and fight back? Why run?
Exactly. I mean, that question causes enormous harm, because it implies choice where there was none. Consider a woman, walking home alone who's suddenly grabbed from behind. In the recounting afterwards, she says, I just stood there. I don't know why I didn't scream. This is one of the most common things survivors report. And it is not consent. And it is not weakness. It's her body's dorsal vagal system, which is deciding, faster than the thought that going limp and quiet was the safest option against a bigger, stronger threat.
Okay, ma'am. So let's unpack fawn a bit more. What does that look like practically?
Understanding, freeze is one of the most important tools we have for reducing, victim blaming in courtrooms, in families, and in how survivors treat themselves afterwards. So, chronic over apologizing, even when nothing is your fault, saying yes when you desperately want to say no, becoming the peacekeeper in every argument, even ones that you aren't that are not yours. You know, example, Priya is a marketing manager who is already handling a full workload. You know, every time a colleague asks her to take on just one more thing, she says yes immediately, smiles, and only feels the resentment and exhaustion hours later, alone, wondering why she agreed again. In the moment, saying no genuinely doesn't feel like an option available to her.
So, do you think it often starts in childhood?
Very often, yes. Though it can develop in adult relationships too, especially abusive or high control ones. Like, think of a child, Mira, growing up with a father whose moods were unpredictable, sometimes warm, sometimes furious, over small things. So Mira learned early that being extra agreeable, extra helpful, extra good bought her a little more safety on the bad days. 20 years later, Mira is the friend who always smooths things over, always apologizes first, and has real trouble naming what she actually wants at dinner, let alone in a serious conflict.
Okay, so it looks like there are some long-term cause. What does that cause do to someone long term?
A real sense of their own needs and boundaries. People with a strong fawn pattern often struggle to even identify what they want because so much of their attention has been trained on other people's emotional states instead of their own.
So these patterns you're saying, ma'am, does it just stay in childhood, or do they follow the people into their adult life? How does the pattern show up later in life?
Yes, absolutely, they follow people, often into completely different contexts than where they started. For example, Vikram, a guy, has been his at his company for 6 years, right? Consistently outperforming colleagues who have been promoted past him. Every time a salary negotiation comes up, he goes quiet, agrees to whatever is being offered, and leaves the meeting, having said none of what he had rehearsed the night before. That's freeze showing up in a boardroom, not a threatening ally. The body doesn't distinguish between types of threat as clearly as we would like to think.
So do you think can someone have both of these at different times?
Very commonly, yes. It's not that a person is a freezer or a fawner. These are the responses and not the identities. The same Priya from our earlier example, fawns constantly at work, saying yes to everything, but with her critical mother, she freezes completely, going silent and unable to defend herself in the argument, even about things she feels strongly about. Same person, two different nervous system responses, depending entirely on the relationship and what worked there before.
So look like there are, we have to recognize different these patterns in oneself. So how would someone start to notice these in their own life?
So for the freeze, notice moments where you go quiet, foggy, or numb in situations that objectively, call for a response. An argument, a conflict, even a stressful email you keep rereading without being able to reply. For Fawn, notice how you say yes when you mean no, how often you apologize reflexively, and whether you can actually name what you want in a given moment or whether your first instinct is always to scan the room for that, for what everyone else wants first. Think
So,
back to the last time, you left a conversation and only later thought of everything you wished you would have said. You know, was your mind actually blank in the moment, or were you saying yes to something you didn't want? That single memory is often enough to show you which pattern you default to.
So, noticing these patterns, is it enough just to notice these patterns, or do you think you need something more?
Noticing is genuinely the first and the most important step. A lot of people carry deep shame about these patterns without realizing they are automatic nervous system responses and not the character flaws. Just replacing self criticism with, oh, that's my nervous system trying to protect me. This changes the entire relationship to the pattern.
So, let's talk about something else, like healing. What actually helps, man? So, what actually helps someone work with these patterns? So, do you think healing is one of them?
Yeah. So for freeze, body-based approaches tend to help most. Something called somatic experiencing, it was developed by Peter Levin. It works directly with the nervous system rather than just talking through the story. Simple grounding techniques help too. Noticing, five things you can see, feel, feet on the floor, slow, controlled breathing. All these, if you want, help to learn about the grounding techniques, you can consult a clinical psychologist for it. Just learn about how to, feel everything. So, for example, Ananya, our student from earlier, which we talked about, started practicing a simple grounding technique before her next Viva, pressing her feet firmly into the floor and naming three objects in the room before answering. It didn't erase her nerves, but it gave her nervous system just enough of a signal of safety that her mind stopped going completely blank.
And
What
for,
grounding does, it connects us with the environment.
and for Fawn, ma'am?
Recovery is often about slowly rebuilding the ability to say no. In low stakes situations, first practicing small boundary setting where the risk is minimal, then gradually building it up. Example, Priya started with something small, instead of saying yes instantly to the colleague's request, she practiced saying, let me check my workload and get back to you. That 5-second pause, repeated for a few weeks, slowly rewired her automatic yes to an actual choice. So it
Okay,
helps.
sure, ma'am. So, do you think people should work on their own, or do you think do you think they need to take therapy? What do you think? Is therapy
So
required?
Of- self-awareness and small daily practice, genuinely helps. But if these patterns are tied to significant trauma, or abuse, and often they are working with a trauma-informed therapist, it matters a lot. Because you are not just changing a habit, you are gently retraining a nervous system that learned these responses to survive something real, and it takes the help of a therapist.
Okay, so let's have some rapid fire round, ma'am. Quick rapid fire questions before we wrap up. So, do you think someone can have a mix of all four responses? Fight, flight, freeze, and fawn.
Absolutely. I mean, most people have a primary go-to response, but nearly everyone can access all four depending on the specific threat.
So, is fawn only about abuse or can it show up in totally normal relationships?
It can absolutely show up in normal, even loving relationships. Anywhere someone learned, you know, at some point that keeping the peace was safer than expressing a need.
Okay. Can children be taught to freeze or fawn less?
Not by telling them to just, speak up, That doesn't work on an autonomic nervous system. What actually helps is consistent, predictable safety over time. So the nervous system doesn't need those responses as often.
One research that you would recommend?
You can do the Pete Walker's, writing on complex PTSD and the post-traumatic stress disorder. And the 4F model is very accessible for a journal audience and a great next step for anyone who recognize themselves today.
What is the 4F model, ma'am?
So the 4F model is freeze, fight, fawn,
Okay.
and these. Yeah, you can learn about it in journal, and you can go through the complex writing of the Pete Walker's PTSD. And
Okay.
if journal in the complex process, it's just for the awareness part. And if the pattern is more related to the personality issues, to the trauma link, then you should go for the help of a therapist.
Okay. So before we close, any final thoughts on the subject?
Just this, that if you recognized yourself in Ananya, Karan, Rohan, Priya, Meera, or Vikram today, please don't turn it into, another reason to be hard on yourself. These are some of the most creative, adaptive things a nervous system can do to survive. The goal is not to feel ashamed of them. It is to gently teach your body that it's safe to have other options too.
Beautifully said, ma'am. So thank you so much for this one, Medhavi ji. It was a great pleasure talking to you and about this topic as well. And yeah, we look forward
Thank
to
you for
more
having
such.
me.
Yeah, we look forward to more such talks from you. So maybe we will see you in a show much sooner in another time, another day. Thank you very much, ma'am. Uh, Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Thank you. Good day. Bye bye.
Thank you.